I never thought stepping into my own kitchen would feel like trespassing. But that morning, I paused at the doorway and heard it. Claire's voice, low and sharp. "Her mind's too far gone. Give it 2 weeks and the estate is ours." My knees didn't buckle. My stomach didn't drop. Instead, I felt a kind of eerie clarity. Cold. Controlled. Every instinct I had sharpened over 30 years as a practicing attorney switched on. She said it so casually. In my own home. As if I weren't just down the hall. As if I weren't still breathing under this roof, drinking this tap water, washing dishes in that sink. And my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised with long nights and longer cases, laughed. "Just keep her off the phone until then," he said. "It's almost wrapped up." Almost. I backed away from the doorway like it was the edge of a cliff. My breath was steady. My pulse was not. I walked past the hall mirror and saw myself. Chin high, lips tight, eyes glassy, but alert. I didn't cry. That was the moment everything changed. Not when Claire first moved in. Not when they insisted I needed more rest. Not even when they took over the bank passwords under the guise of helping. No, it was that whisper, cold and impatient and final. I was supposed to be a ghost by now, something they could talk over, dismiss, and dissolve. A harmless, confused woman with fading memories and misplaced keys. But I was none of that. My name is Eleanor Grace Whitlow, and I drafted my first power of attorney contract at 28. I argued my first inheritance case before I had a mortgage. I know the shape of fraud, the scent of coercion, the exact punctuation of betrayal. They forgot that about me. Or maybe they never respected it to begin with. I waited until I heard them move to the living room, until Claire's saccharine voice started chirping about herbal tea and my son chuckled about the stock market. Then I stepped into the kitchen, calm, neutral, as if I'd just come down for sugar. "Good morning," I said. Claire nearly dropped her mug. My son smiled too widely. "Mom, you're up early." "I had a dream," I replied. "Figured I'd make use of the extra time." The lies slid out of my mouth like silk. That's the thing about people who think you're broken. They don't notice when you start repairing yourself. I opened the drawer beneath the toaster, retrieved my little black notebook, the one they thought I'd forgotten existed, and started taking notes. I noted the date, the time, their expressions, their proximity to my phone charger. Claire watched me with a tight-lipped smile. "You look tired, Eleanor. Maybe rest a bit more." I smiled back, dead in the eyes. "Maybe later." She touched my arm. Too firmly. "We just want you to be okay." "I am." I lied again easily. "I'm better than I've been in weeks." Because I had a plan now. And they had no idea that the woman they were trying to erase had just stepped back into full focus. Later that morning, I sat on the patio with a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the garden I once built bloom without me. The wisteria had overgrown the lattice, and the fountain needed cleaning. My hands itched to fix it, but I stayed still, observing, waiting. From the kitchen window, I could hear Claire laughing. Too loud, too forced, and my son Ethan joined her, laughing like nothing was wrong. Like their lies hadn't just scraped the last shred of peace from my soul. They came out with brunch plates, like we were some happy, wholesome family. Claire placed a blanket on my lap without asking. Ethan leaned down to kiss my forehead. "How's my girl today?" he asked, like I was 5. Like I wasn't the one who paid for his law school when his scholarships ran dry. Like I hadn't stayed up every night when he was sick senior year, researching treatment options while his own wife was off drinking with her colleagues. "I'm fine," I said quietly. Claire sat down beside me with her plate of arugula and egg whites, crossed her legs like she was settling in for a show. "You know," she chirped, "Dr. Henley said you'd have good days like this. The lucidity comes and goes." Lucidity. I almost laughed. That word. That was her weapon now. Big, clinical, and heavy with implication. She wanted me to flinch, to ask what she meant, to show a crack. But I didn't. I sipped my tea and looked her dead in the eye. "And who is Dr. Henley again?" I asked. She blinked. "Your neurologist." "Funny," I replied, my voice even. "I don't remember consenting to any exams, especially not with someone named Henley." Ethan cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. "We just thought it'd be good to have a second opinion. After the stroke, things have shifted." "Shifted?" I repeated. I let the word hang in the air like spoiled milk. Claire picked up where he fumbled. "We're only thinking about what's best for you, Eleanor. It's not easy for families, when health declines." There it was, framed like concern, wrapped in pity, tied off with entitlement. I had played this game before. I had watched families use faux empathy to edge out matriarchs, manipulating timelines and, quote, intentions to redraw entire legacies. I just never imagined mine would do the same. When did my son stop seeing me as his anchor and start seeing me as a burden? They thought they were winning. I could see it in the way Claire tilted her chin just slightly when she mentioned bank statements, in the way Ethan chuckled softly when I asked about mail I hadn't seen in weeks. They thought they were already halfway there. "Thank you," I said softly, smiling like a grandmother who didn't know better, "for taking such good care of me." Claire beamed. Ethan looked relieved. And in that moment, I became the perfect shadow of their expectations. Let them believe I was soft. Let them think I was too slow to catch on. Let them play out their little charade for another week or two. Because when I returned, it wouldn't be with questions. It would be with facts, affidavits, signatures, court orders. I finished my tea and stood up slowly, one hand resting on the back of my chair for dramatic effect. "Gonna lie down," I said. And I did. But only long enough to unlock the drawer in my nightstand and retrieve the old file marked E.G. Whitlow, contingency. They wanted me gone in 2 weeks. I only needed 10 days. I started noticing it about a month after the stroke. The subtle shifts. The way Claire began answering the phone before I could. The way mail started arriving already opened, tucked into polite little piles next to the untouched fruit bowl. She called it helping. But it felt like handling. At first I thought I was being paranoid. Then Ethan said it aloud. "Let Claire manage the bills, Mom," he said, while brushing crumbs off his slacks, barely looking up from his phone. "You should be relaxing. Resting." I'd just asked about a tax document, one that should have come to me. One I never saw. The controls slipped away in teaspoons. My checkbook vanished one day. Claire said she'd filed it away somewhere safe. My iPad locked itself with a password I didn't remember setting. Suddenly, Claire was the one confirming my doctor's appointments. I was just brought along. If I reached for my own agency, they called it stress. If I questioned a change, it was confusion. If I pushed back, I was agitated. And they wrote all of it down. Claire started keeping a, quote, health journal. At first, I found it in the kitchen drawer, tucked behind the scissors. Open. Bold notes scribbled in red pen. Repeated same question 3 times. Possible memory lapse. Confused about medication schedule. Monitor closely. Became irritable during breakfast. Consider adjusting mood stabilizers. I stared at the handwriting for a long time. Then I closed the journal and put it back exactly where I found it. They were building a case, and I was supposed to be too foggy to notice. What they didn't realize is I'd handled elder guardianship cases before. I'd stood beside clients who had everything taken from them under the guise of protection. Families were rarely cruel out loud. No, they were careful, soft-spoken, legal. They smiled as they signed away your rights. They kissed your forehead and called it love. Claire was no different. She didn't yell. She cooed. She didn't demand. She advised. She built a wall of politeness around me so tall that even Ethan didn't notice it was a cage. And Ethan, oh Ethan, I used to think my son's greatest flaw was cowardice. But now I saw something worse. Complacency. He liked the convenience, having Claire run things, not having to question her decisions. He could still claim innocence that way. Hands clean, heart conflicted. One evening, I tried to test the waters. "Did you cancel my garden service?" I asked him lightly. He blinked. "Claire said it was too expensive. You didn't need it anymore." Too expensive? That garden was mine. My therapy. My morning ritual for 20 years. I didn't need her approval to trim hedges or order fertilizer. But apparently, I did now. "Ah," I said, nodding like I understood. And that night, I went to the attic. It had been years since I climbed those stairs. My knees ached, and I moved slower than I used to. But my mind was clear. And up there, beneath old quilts and mothballed boxes, was the chest I hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside it were my law credentials, my notary stamp, copies of every legal document I'd ever drafted for myself, including the original family trust, untouched, still valid, and a yellow envelope. Inside, a list of former colleagues, 3 client affidavits I'd kept for teaching purposes, and a worn index card that read in block ink, "In case they forget who you are." I sat down right there on the attic floor and started reading. They thought they were rewriting my legacy. They forgot I wrote it first. 2 days later, I sorted through the stack of mail Claire had, once again kindly, gathered for me. She handed it over with her usual half-smile, the one that tried to say, "I'm doing you a favor," when we both knew she was doing me in. "Nothing important," she chirped. "Just the usual boring stuff." I took it to my room, closed the door, and locked it. That was new. I'd never locked a door in my own home before. But now every door felt like a last defense. Among the credit card offers and insurance statements, there it was, a cream envelope with a gold-embossed return address from the firm I'd used for my estate planning before I retired. Inside was a confirmation letter from a notary I didn't recognize, and stapled to the back was a copy of the updated trust. The paper crackled as I unfolded it. My name was still on it, but it was in the past tense. The trustee now read, Ethan Whitlow, with Claire Whitlow as successor. My own title, settler and original trustee, was crossed out and annotated with a date that fell 3 weeks after my stroke. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the document. Eleanor G. Whitlow. It looked like mine, nearly perfect. The loops were right. The tail of the W swooped down just like I used to do it. But the pressure was too light. My G was too round. Whoever had done it was good. Very good. But not good enough. Because I knew that signature like I knew my own reflection. And this was an imitation. I'd spent decades drafting documents, reviewing contracts, spotting inconsistencies that lesser eyes missed. This was amateur work wrapped in false confidence. I flipped the page. A notary seal. New. Dated. Official. I didn't know this notary, but Claire did. I saw his card on the kitchen counter last month, and she'd brushed it off with, "Oh, he just notarized some car documents for Ethan." Liar. I laid the document flat on the bed and stared at it until the edges blurred. This wasn't just manipulation. This was fraud. And not just casual fraud, probate fraud, identity misuse, possibly even financial elder abuse if they'd used this revision to move assets already. And they thought I wouldn't notice. That I'd shuffle around in slippers while they gutted my legacy. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. Not because of what they'd done, but because of how little they thought of me while doing it. When Claire knocked on my door later, asking if I needed help with dinner, I didn't look up from my writing. "No," I said softly. "I'm working on something." She lingered. "Are you sure? You seem tired." I turned slightly, letting just a trace of steel slip into my voice. "Funny, Claire. I was just thinking how clear everything feels lately." I heard her retreat down the hallway, and once she was gone, I reached for the secure envelope I'd pre-labeled years ago. In the event of fraud, legal trigger. Inside it, I slipped a photocopy of the forged document. Tomorrow, I would bring it to Henry Duval, a former colleague now semi-retired, but still sharp as a tack and meaner than a cornered attorney. If they wanted a game of signatures, let's play. But I don't bluff. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I was already halfway through sorting files in my upstairs study. I didn't bother with breakfast. Hunger meant nothing to me now. Focus was fuel enough. Claire knocked once around 8 a.m. "You want some oatmeal, Eleanor?" I didn't answer. There was a pause. I heard her footsteps retreat. Good. Let her worry. By 10, I was staring at a thick manila folder labeled Whitlow Trust Original. The paper was yellowing but intact. My handwriting was sharp, annotations precise. The original trust. Drafted, signed, and notarized in my own office back in 2002. Witnessed by Henry Duval himself. I smiled as I compared it line by line to the revised copy Claire had funneled through her puppet notary. She removed the staggered vesting clauses, flattened the contingent authority, stripped it down to a straight successor handoff, like I was already dead. I designed the original trust with layers of protection. For myself, for the estate, for the very scenario I now found myself in. Claire, in her arrogance, had streamlined everything into simplicity. Simplicity was easy to dismantle. The rest of the day, I worked in silence. I wrote nothing by email. I made no calls from the house phone. I wasn't about to tip her off by using anything with ears. Instead, I penned a short note to Henry, coded, careful, requesting a discreet estate consultation, and dropped it at the mailbox myself while going for a walk. That night, when Ethan sat beside me on the couch with his fake concern, I nodded like a doll. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" "I'm just a little tired," I said, eyes wide, innocent. "Things feel foggy." His shoulders relaxed. He patted my hand. Claire smiled at me from across the room like she'd already picked out my funeral flowers. I almost laughed. They forgot I built the house Claire was now robbing. I wasn't just the settler of that trust. I had founded my own practice, defended high-net clients against vultures like her. I knew every angle of estate litigation. I trained half the lawyers still using my old templates. The difference was, back then, I was paid to defend other families. Now, I was defending mine from itself. After dinner, I went to the attic again. This time not for files, but for something more intimate. An old audio recorder. My voice, years ago, practicing court testimony. The tape still worked. I slid in a fresh cassette. Pressed record. "This is Eleanor Grace Whitlow. Date, April 9th. I am of sound mind and memory. The following statements are intended as testimony should the need arise." I documented everything. The date, I had my stroke. The day Claire took over medication duties. The changes in my financial access. The trust documents. The forged signature. The tone Ethan used when he told me I didn't need to worry myself anymore. I recounted it all. Calm. Precise. Legal. Then I ended the recording with one sentence. "This is not confusion. This is evidence." I stored the tape in a lockbox I hadn't touched since my husband died. And then, for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not deeply, not comfortably, but with a sense of calm I hadn't felt since that morning at the kitchen doorway. Because now they didn't just have a problem on their hands, they had an adversary. The next morning, while Claire was out running errands and Ethan was locked in his office pretending to work, I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and pulled out a photo. There were 3 people in it. Myself, a former client named Mrs. Ada Fenley, and her niece, smiling, arms linked, back when we all still believed Ada had years left. But the photo wasn't what mattered. It was what came after it. I met Ada when she was 78, widowed, sharp as glass. She walked into my firm with a folder thicker than her own purse and said, "I want to make sure no one steals what I earned." I liked her immediately. We drafted everything: trusts, health proxies, real estate protections. It was airtight. But then her niece moved in, started answering her phone, missing appointments, forgetting to pass on messages. Soon Ada stopped showing up at all. When she finally resurfaced, she was pale, thin, and confused. Her niece had taken over her medications, convinced 2 doctors to write up cognitive decline. She'd even coerced Ada into signing new documents with her hand guided, Literally. I took the case. Got everything reversed. But Ada didn't live long after. Her estate passed the right way, but not before she spent the last year of her life wondering if she was losing her mind or if someone was taking it from her. That case haunted me, and now it was my reality. Claire's version of theft wasn't loud or messy. She smiled while she cut, told Ethan I was declining, monitored my meds, mentioned doctors I'd never spoken to. She never said, "Give me the money." She said, "Let's simplify." Simplify. That was the word abusers loved. Easier, quieter, smoother. Until you looked around and realized everything you were had been folded into someone else's control. No, not me. I tucked Ada's photo back in its folder and stood up. It was time to document everything, the way I had for her. That afternoon, I took a cab. Yes, a cab, because Claire had mysteriously misplaced my car keys last week and visited a private psychiatric clinic downtown. I didn't call ahead. I walked in, coat buttoned, ID in hand. "I'd like a cognitive evaluation," I said. The receptionist blinked. "Do you have a referral?" "I have a license," I replied, pulling out my bar card. "And the right to request an exam." She nodded quickly. Dr. Sims was young, too young, but smart. I could tell by the way he adjusted the questioning once he realized who I was. He made me list presidents backward, solve math, identify word associations, remember patterns. When we finished, he looked genuinely curious. "Why the test, if you don't mind me asking?" I smiled. "Just putting a few things on the record." He offered to write a notarized summary and send the results to whomever I wished. I told him I'd pick it up myself next week. Notarized. Unfiltered. Independent. Another brick in the wall I was building, strong, silent, deliberate. By the time I got home, Claire was back. She asked how my walk went. "Lovely," I said, placing my coat over the chair. "Got some air, cleared my head," she smiled. "Good for you." Then she picked up her phone and began texting again, probably with that same notary, the one who'd rubber-stamped her theft. Let her text, let her plan, let her think the walls were closing in on me. Because I was about to show her how a real foundation is laid. 3 days later, I sat in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from my old office, the same place I used to meet clients too wary to walk through courthouse doors. I chose a corner table, back to the wall, eyes on the exit. Old habits. I hadn't lost them. The door chimed, and in walked Henry Duval. Same trench coat, same slight limp from the tennis injury he never let heal. But his mind was still a scalpel. He looked at me, tilted his head. "You look like hell." I smiled. "You should see the other guy." We didn't waste time. I handed him the folder, the forged trust, the psychiatric evaluation, the audio affidavit, and my original estate documents. He flipped through it all silently, nodding once, twice, the way he used to in court when he already knew the outcome but let the opposition dig their own grave anyway. "Claire's good," he said finally, "but not good enough. This is sloppy, premature, greedy. She thinks she's got a short clock," I said. "They're pushing fast. I give it under 2 weeks before they try to petition the court for full control." He looked up sharply. "Then we act faster." Henry didn't ask if I wanted to proceed. He knew. He pulled out a notepad and scribbled a list of next steps. "First," he said, "we file a request for a court-appointed guardian ad litem. Independent, neutral, with full investigative authority. They'll talk to you, review the trust documents, and, with your evaluation, they'll smell the fraud. Second, we secure the trust assets, temporarily freeze them until the review is done. I'll file under pseudonym, just in case Claire's watching the court calendar. And third," he looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw it. "The fire. We set a trap." I leaned in. "Already halfway there. There's a camera in the mantel clock." "She said too much already." He grinned. "God, I missed working with you." I gripped my tea with steady fingers. "Then don't think of this as work. Think of it as cleanup." Henry stood. "Give me 2 days." We'll need notarized transcripts, copies of your ID, the psych report, and audio. You'll get the official case number by Friday. And Claire? His voice was cold. Precise. She won't see it coming. We parted without sentiment. No hugs. No drama. Just a silent agreement. She had built a case against a woman she thought was too far gone, but I had just recruited the man who helped build my empire. When I got home, Claire was arranging fresh flowers in the hallway, her new obsession now that she considered this house hers. She smiled as I walked in. "Did you have a nice outing?" I nodded, ran into an old friend. "That's nice," she chirped. "Anyone I'd know?" I smiled back, slow and deliberate. "Let's just say he remembers who I am." She blinked, just for a second. But it was enough. I walked past her, up the stairs, and into my room. That night, I pulled out the trust file again. On the back of the original document, I wrote one sentence in permanent marker. "A signature is just ink, unless it's mine." Then I added the date, and underlined it, twice. It happened on a Thursday morning. The air was brittle, dry, the kind that settles in your throat and makes every breath feel like sandpaper. Claire had been hovering for days, watching me closely, asking strange, deliberate questions like, "Do you remember what day it is, Eleanor?" And, "Have you taken your meds this morning, sweetheart?" I'd answer slowly, letting my eyes drift, acting just confused enough. And I knew why. They were planning something. I could feel it in the silence between their glances. Something final. That morning, Claire staged it. She called Ethan home from work. "Emergency," she said loudly in the kitchen, pretending I couldn't hear her from the hallway. I stayed upstairs, listening through the thin vents while she rehearsed her performance. When Ethan arrived, they made sure I was in the living room. Claire brewed chamomile tea and placed it on the table, adding an extra pill beside it. Not one of mine. Not something I recognized. I didn't drink it. She sighed loudly and turned to Ethan. "She's refusing medication again. I just don't know what else to do." He watched me from the armchair, eyes full of concern he hadn't earned. "Mom, are you okay? Do you know what day it is?" I stared at him blankly. "The year is 1982, I whispered, almost giggling. "President Nixon sends his regards." Claire looked triumphant. Ethan looked scared. It was all part of the scene. Their scene. The one they needed to justify the final document they'd filed, without my knowledge, in probate court that morning. I found out that night. They didn't tell me, of course, but I intercepted a voicemail on Ethan's phone, left on speaker while he made dinner. The lawyer's assistant confirming their petition to have me declared legally incapacitated. The court date was expedited. 5 days. It was happening. Claire had convinced one of her friends, Drive Caldwell, a psychiatrist on their payroll, to file a second report. This one with words like dementia, delusions, unreliable memory. I sat alone in my room after dinner and stared at the bedroom mirror. They were trying to erase me, not just take my house, my life, but my mind, my name. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a public execution of identity. I opened the drawer and pulled out my recorder. "This is Eleanor Grace Whitlow," I said, voice steady. Today, Claire Whitlow placed an unknown pill in my tea and attempted to prompt behavior indicative of psychosis. I pretended confusion. I did not drink the tea. The incident was witnessed by Ethan Whitlow. The pill remains in the teacup, untouched, and will be stored for testing. I placed the cup, still full, in a sealed plastic bag. Then I locked it in the freezer with a note for Henry. When Ethan knocked an hour later, I was calm. "Mom?" he asked gently. "Claire and I are going to meet with Dr. Caldwell tomorrow. He might have some recommendations for your care going forward." "Lovely," I said, smiling. Let them think it was working. Let them believe I was unraveling. Because when that petition landed in front of the judge, it wouldn't be their words that mattered. It would be the footage, the recording, the forensic lab report, the notarized evaluations. I spent the next 2 days pretending to forget. I let the oatmeal burn. I called the dog by the name of my childhood piano. I stared at the television when it wasn't even on. And they believed it. Claire walked around the house with a sick kind of cheer. She clucked her tongue and whispered things like, "Poor thing," loud enough for me to hear. Ethan kept rubbing the back of his neck and looking away. He didn't want to know how far this had gone. He just wanted it to be over. So I let them think it would be. But behind the scenes, my hands were moving. I used an old laptop they didn't know I kept charged in my sewing cabinet. No apps, no history, no synced accounts. I sent a message through an encrypted portal to Henry. Proceed with filing. Use alias. All materials ready for pickup. Timeline: 4 days. Then I made my second move. I contacted my old law partner, not from my phone, but from the payphone outside the pharmacy 3 blocks down. Told her only what she needed to know, that I needed a guardian ad litem assigned immediately under anonymous petition. She didn't ask questions. She owed me too much. That night, I planted the seed. During dinner, I turned to Claire and said, "Do you think Ethan will be okay after I'm gone?" She blinked. "Gone where?" "Oh," I smiled faintly. "I just feel something coming, like a thinning. Like maybe the world's folding me in." Her eyes lit up. Greedy. "You've been feeling that way long?" "Since the headaches started." "You remember the headaches, don't you?" I saw her pupils shift. I had never once complained about headaches. She didn't catch the bait, but the panic was in her throat. Ethan watched me with uneasy guilt. "We're gonna help you, Mom." I nodded sweetly. "I know. You always do." Later that night, I heard the whisper fight behind the guest room door. "She's slipping," Claire hissed. "We need to act now." "She's still my mother," Ethan whispered. "Then let her die with dignity, and without dragging us into legal hell," Claire snapped. I leaned my head against the wall and listened to the sound of my son swallowing his shame. The next morning, the letter arrived. Hand-delivered. Certified. Unmistakable. A court date. Guardianship hearing. 5 days. I let them tell me. Let Claire hold the envelope like it was some tragic announcement from the Queen herself. She said softly, "It's just a formality, Eleanor. Just to protect you. Don't be afraid." I blinked slowly, eyes watering just enough to make her relax. That afternoon, while they were at their appointment, Henry arrived in a nondescript sedan. We met in the garage. He opened his briefcase and showed me what we'd built: the formal opposition petition with attached psychiatric evaluation, audio evidence, timeline affidavit, and camera footage. Claire muttering, "She won't last the month," while adjusting her blouse in my mirror. "This," Henry said, "is a nail gun to their coffin. You ready?" I nodded. "Let them build the gallows. I'll bring the rope." He grinned, then handed me the last piece, a notarized letter naming me fully competent and requesting immediate investigation into elder fraud. By the time Claire got back, I was watching Jeopardy and drinking tea that I'd brewed myself. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was worried, but because I was writing. 14 pages. Each line etched with the kind of clarity you don't fake. The kind that comes from being buried alive and clawing your way out with your bare hands. I sat at my old desk, the one they pushed into the corner like a museum piece. The lamp buzzed faintly, and the air smelled of dust and quiet rage. The affidavit began with the truth. "I, Eleanor Grace Whitlow, being of sound mind, hereby submit this personal account in response to the petition claiming my mental incapacitation." Then came the rest. Detailed. Dated. Untangled. I described the stroke. The recovery. The sudden flood of support from Claire. The way she handled my medication, cut off my mail, rerouted my calls. How she used words like safety and simplify to build walls around me that even Ethan didn't recognize. I wrote about the forged trust, the handwriting that mimicked mine but missed the weight of it, the stroke of the G in Grace that curled too early, the notary whose stamp was bought, not earned. I included a full index of events: the day they moved the checkbook, the morning she placed an unprescribed pill in my tea, the moment she whispered 2 weeks in my kitchen. Each claim backed by audio, video, eyewitness memory, my psychiatric exam, the guardian's own notes. I didn't write emotionally, I wrote legally. But in the final paragraph, I allowed myself one personal truth. I was once the trustee of this family. Then I became the ghost of it. They thought silence meant surrender. But I was not lost. I was watching, documenting, preparing. And now, I ask the court to do what I could not, while bound by politeness. Remove the threat from within my home. I printed it on linen stock, signed it with a pen I hadn't used in years. My father's, the one he gave me when I passed the bar. My hand didn't tremble once. When Henry came to collect it in the morning, he stood for a long time reading the last paragraph. Then he looked at me and said, "You've got fire left, Eleanor." "No," I corrected. "I've got precision." He smiled. "Court's in 2 days." I nodded. "Let's not waste them." The next morning, Claire asked if I wanted to review my meds with her. I smiled, sweet as ever. Of course. She laid them out on the table. 3 pills I didn't recognize. "What's this one again?" I asked. She paused, but only for a second. "Oh, just a mild sedative. Doctor's orders." I nodded, then carefully pushed the pills back into her hand. "You take it then. Let's see how mild it feels." She stared at me. Something in her eyes flickered. Panic, maybe? Or realization. I didn't blink. That day she texted Ethan more than usual. Her phone barely left her palm. She whispered on the patio while pretending to water plants she hadn't touched in weeks. She could feel it shifting. They always do, just before the fall. They think they're holding the strings, right up until the moment they find themselves dangling by them. And I'd just pulled hard enough for the knot to tighten. I invited them to dinner on a Sunday. Claire lit up like I'd offered her an award. "That's a wonderful idea, Eleanor," she said. "It'll be so nice to do something together before the hearing." Exactly. Before the hearing. I spent the day slow cooking a roast, polishing the silver, setting the table with the linen Claire had once deemed too fussy. The house smelled like rosemary and finality. Claire wore pearls. Ethan wore confusion. I wore my old courtroom perfume. We sat, exchanged forced pleasantries, and when the wine was poured, Claire cleared her throat like she was about to give a toast. "I brought something," she said, slipping a folder from her oversized handbag. "Just a few final documents to make things simpler after the hearing." She placed it beside my plate like it was dessert. Inside, a new will, entirely typed, conveniently lacking any of the nuance from my original. It passed everything to Ethan and Claire. No mention of foundations, charities, or Lydia, my late sister's daughter. No contingencies. No protections. Just one line at the bottom. "Signed in sound mind by Eleanor Grace Whitlow." She thought she was signing the kill shot. What she didn't know was what lay beneath the tablecloth, just under my chair. A small digital recorder, already running. Also under the table, an envelope, sealed and notarized. Inside it, a copy of the real trust, my affidavit, and a letter addressed to Judge Freeman, pre-filed through Henry's office that morning. But I played along. I opened the folder and skimmed it. I said, feigning confusion. "You did this all yourself?" Claire smiled modestly. "We had a little help. But yes. And you want me to sign this?" I asked, tilting my head. "If you feel up to it," she said too quickly. "I do," I replied. I picked up the pen, the one she'd brought, with the fancy black lacquer, probably engraved with Ethan's initials. I clicked it once. Then I clicked it again. And again. 3 deliberate times. The signal Henry and I had agreed upon. If anything went sideways, the backup plan activated. But nothing would go sideways, because they were too far gone in their confidence to question a single thing. I signed the fake will, carefully, legibly, right over the line Claire had left for me like a trap. She smiled wide, giddy. Ethan looked unsure but said nothing. As usual. "You've made a smart decision," she said. I nodded. "You have no idea," I replied. They stayed for dessert. Claire even had a second glass of wine. She giggled, said how nice it was to be a family again. And I smiled back, because I knew what was coming. After they left, I placed the recorder and signed Will into a padded envelope, already addressed. I walked it to the mailbox myself, postmarked, time-stamped, irrefutable. By the time they slept, the judge would have everything. Claire thought she'd filmed me, signing away my power. But I had just filmed her, celebrating a crime. And on Monday, the courtroom wouldn't need much convincing. The signature was mine. But the choice? That was hers. And she'd just chosen wrong. Monday arrived with a cold wind and a courtroom number printed in bold ink across the top of a summons. Claire wore navy, a blazer too sharp for someone claiming to be a loving caregiver. She walked into the courthouse like she was accepting an award. Ethan followed, pale and tight-lipped. I walked in with Henry. No walker, no cane, no hesitation. The clerk at the door said, "Ms. Whitlow?" I answered without blinking. "Present." We sat on opposite sides. Claire kept glancing at me, waiting for the performance she'd come to expect. The vacant stare, the confusion, the stumble over names. Instead, I took out a pen and legal pad. I didn't write anything. I just let her see it. Judge Freeman entered, square-shouldered and alert. He wasn't new. He wasn't soft. And Claire didn't know it, but he'd already reviewed the files sent from Henry's office. The footage. The affidavit. The teacup Claire had tampered with. Now logged in an evidence bag. The psychiatric evaluation. Every page. He didn't even look at Claire when he began. "Before we proceed with the guardianship petition," he said, "I'd like to review a few supplemental materials submitted by counsel for the respondent, Ms. Whitlow." Claire shifted. Ethan sat straighter. Henry stood and began the quiet dismantling. He played one clip from the recording, just a short one. Claire's voice rang out across the courtroom speakers. "She won't last the month. Just sign it. She'll never contest it." The room fell silent. Claire's face went white. Ethan turned slowly toward her, confusion warping into disbelief. Henry didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This," he said, "is a pattern of coercion. This woman, my client, was manipulated, isolated, medically undermined, and defrauded. The footage shows intent. The documents show forgery. The evaluations show full competence." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Whitlow, do you wish to speak?" I stood, not slowly, not with caution, with purpose. "I wish only to say," I began, voice clear, "that love without respect is not love, and that silence does not equal weakness." I knew what they were doing. I let them finish the story, because they were too arrogant to realize I'd already written the ending. Claire opened her mouth. The judge cut her off. "You'll get your chance. But you may want to consider your rights carefully from this point forward." She sat down hard, eyes wide, hands trembling. The judge turned to Ethan. "Mr. Whitlow, you were complicit, whether by action or inaction. If you continue to align yourself with this effort, you may find yourself named in an accessory filing." Ethan stammered. I didn't know." The judge gave him a long, hard look. "You didn't ask." And that was the truest thing said all morning. At the end of the hearing, the guardianship petition was dismissed. All power restored. All forged documents voided. But the courtroom didn't cheer. It just breathed. Claire stormed out, nearly tripping over the threshold. Ethan lingered. "Mom," he began. But I didn't let him finish. "You miss me now," I said quietly. "But where were you when she was handing me pills I didn't recognize?" He had no answer. And that was answer enough. They came to the house 2 days later. Claire, looking hollow and sour, still wearing the pearl earrings she thought made her look respectable. Ethan beside her, hands in his pockets like a boy caught skipping school. They thought they were walking into a final settlement, some kind of civil agreement. What they walked into was me. I was seated in the living room, back straight, original trust laid out before me like a declaration of war. Next to me sat Henry. To his left, Officer Delaney from the county's Elder Protection Unit. And just behind him, clipboard in hand, stood a state investigator. Claire faltered at the threshold. Ethan froze. "This is harassment," Claire said immediately, voice brittle. "No," I said, not rising. "This is the fallout." Henry stood. "Ms. Whitlow, based on the court ruling and our subsequent filing, law enforcement has opened an investigation into fraudulent notarization, coercion, elder abuse, and attempted theft through manipulation of estate documents." Claire's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Officer Delaney stepped forward. "Claire Whitlow, you are being placed under arrest for financial fraud, will tampering, and endangerment of a protected adult." The moment her hands were cuffed behind her back, I felt no joy, only justice. As she was led out, she turned to Ethan, eyes wide with disbelief. "Do something." But Ethan just stood there. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. "Mom," I waited. "Why didn't you just tell me?" he whispered. "We could have talked." My voice came out low and steady. "You don't talk to someone you think is fading. You talk at them." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "But you liked not knowing," I interrupted. "You liked not being responsible. So long as she made the decisions, you didn't have to be the villain." He looked down at his shoes and for once said nothing. The officer with the clipboard handed me a copy of the report, complete with the case number, charges, and timeline. Claire would likely face multiple felony counts. If convicted, she'd never control a dime of anyone's future again. And as for Ethan, I didn't call the police on him. I didn't need to. He'd have to live with knowing he stood in the room while his mother was nearly erased and said nothing. When they left, the house was quiet again. Not empty, just clean. I walked to the fireplace, took the new will Claire had gleefully watched me sign, tore it in half, then again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti. Let her watch from her cell. Let her see what happened when you tried to bury someone who still had breath, bones, and a damn bar number. That night, I sat with my tea, real tea, steeped by my own hands, and wrote a final addendum to my living trust. It read, "If I am ever declared unfit again, may it be by my own doing, not by greed wearing a pearl necklace." The courtroom felt colder this time, not because of the weather, but because of the silence, the heavy, coiled kind that settles when people know what's coming but can't say it out loud. Claire sat across the aisle in her wrinkleless navy suit. No jewelry this time, her hair tied back. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed being pitiful. Ethan sat behind her. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. Henry sat beside me, notes in hand, calm as a winter pond. The judge called us to order, and I stood. No cane, no assistants, just me, paper in hand, ready to close the door for good. "Ms. Whitlow," the judge began, "the court has reviewed the submitted evidence, including the hidden camera footage, notarized false signatures, and the defendant's recorded statements. We've also reviewed your medical evaluations, both independent and court-assigned. Your mental capacity is not in question." I nodded once. Let him finish. "Ms. Claire Whitlow," he turned, voice sharpening, "you are hereby found liable for the attempted coercion and fraudulent manipulation of legal documents pertaining to the Whitlow estate." Claire's mouth opened like she might object, but her lawyer, finally, placed a hand on her arm. The judge continued, "While sentencing will be deferred to criminal court, this probate court rules the following. All forged documents are void. The original trust is reinstated. You are barred from accessing, advising, or influencing any estate decisions regarding Eleanor Grace Whitlow." He turned to me again. Do you have anything you wish to say? I stepped forward, held the paper, didn't look at it once. They loved my money more than they loved me, I said. And when they thought they could get both, they tried to erase the only thing that still made me dangerous, my mind. Claire flinched. I let my voice sharpen. I am not angry because they tried to take my house. I am furious because they thought I wouldn't notice. I stepped back. The judge nodded. Let the record reflect the court's agreement. Probate fraud, especially toward the elderly, is a growing epidemic. But not today. He slammed the gavel once. Claire sat still. No tears. Just humiliation. Ethan stood slowly. Try it again. Mom, I'm sorry. I looked at him. No, I said. You're sorry she got caught. He looked down. I turned to leave. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like a woman crawling back from the grave. I felt like the one who wrote the eulogy. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, small-time local types. Henry handled them. I didn't need the attention. All I needed was my name back, my legacy, my house, and no one else's hand on my pills. Claire spent 2 nights in county jail before the bail hearing. She didn't get released. Turns out, forging estate documents for a mentally competent woman and then trying to drug her into compliance doesn't sit well with prosecutors, especially not when you laugh about it on camera. Her charges included financial abuse, fraudulent notarization, tampering with legal documents, attempted poisoning, pending toxicology. Her lawyer tried to negotiate, claimed emotional strain and caretaking burnout. The DA didn't flinch. Claire would likely serve time. And even if she didn't, she'd never practice anything with a license again. Not real estate, not healthcare, nothing. I didn't bury her. The law did. As for Ethan, he came by the house once. Not to apologize. Not really. More like a man hoping for an open window when he knew the door had slammed shut. He stood on the porch with a bouquet of gas station flowers, a grocery bag of my favorite tea, and the look of a son who thought regret counted for something. I opened the door. Didn't invite him in. Mom, he started. I didn't know how bad it was. She told me you were slipping. She told you a lot of things, I said. He nodded slowly. You always seemed strong. I didn't think she could get to you. She didn't, I said, voice flat. She got to you. He winced. I made a mistake, he whispered. I stared at him for a long time, then finally said, mistakes are what you make when you trip. You helped push. He didn't respond. After a long silence, he held out the bag. I brought your lemon tea. I shook my head. The last time someone made me tea in this house, I nearly lost everything. He lowered his hand. I let the silence grow. Then said gently, I hope you learned something from this, Ethan. But you'll do it from somewhere else. I shut the door. Didn't slam it, but it stayed shut. That evening, I updated my will, removed both names, Ethan and Claire, entirely. I added my niece Lydia back in, a woman who called every holiday, who drove across the state after my stroke just to hold my hand and didn't ask for a thing. I gave her the house. Not because I was dying, but because I wanted someone honest to know what it felt like to belong in it. I also hired a part-time caretaker, not someone Claire recommended, someone I vetted myself. A retired nurse named Joni, who laughed like thunder and carried a pocket knife. I liked her immediately. With Claire gone and Ethan erased from my affairs, the house breathed differently, warmer, safer, real. I started walking again, cooking for myself. Even planted tomatoes behind the tool shed, the same shed where Claire once told me, don't bother, you'll forget they're there. I watered them every morning, just because she said I wouldn't.